Welcome to the Niche Pursuits podcast. Today, my guest is Mordy Oberstein. Mordy is the head of SEO branding at Wix. He's the host of the SERP Up podcast. He was previously at Semrush and still consults to them to this day. So his resume speaks for itself. He's got a ton of insight into the broad-based SEO community in terms of what is working and what isn't, in terms of what ranks and what doesn't. And we dive into a lot of the high-level conversations that are going on in today's SEO world. Most notably, I really try to make sure to ask him questions specific to content creators and affiliate marketers. He makes a statement at one point that Google is at war with affiliate marketers. And so much of our conversation is really about how we convince Google that we deserve to rank. With all the different updates that Google is releasing, it's very hard to keep track of what works and what doesn't work. You might be in a position where your website gets hit by an update or surges from an update. And I really try to unpack with Mordy all the different things that go into ranking on a page level, that go into showing experience and some more of the EEAT components. We talk about domain level quality, why he is insistent that it's important that you pay attention to. And then in the second half of the conversation, we wade into AI and talking about how artificial intelligence is going to impact the SERPs, the search engine result pages, and what you need to be doing about it. Where AI makes sense for you to use as a business, where it doesn't make sense. And then we do talk a pretty high level about exactly how to convince Google, to show Google that your content is written by a human and actually has expertise and experience behind it. Some really fun topics that we get into, and I really think that you're going to enjoy Mordy's conversation about SEO as it is today. Before we jump into the podcast, I wanted to let you know that today's episode is sponsored by Search Intelligence. Here's a short clip of Ferry from Search Intelligence showing you how their agency built digital PR links to a client's website.
What a crazy campaign. How to Sleep on Your Back. This campaign got us links in Huffington Post, Glamour magazine, Mirror, and lots of other great news publications. Let me show you how we've done it. It was so simple. Our sleep client provided us with expert commentary about how to train yourself to fall asleep on your back. They also gave advice on why it's best to sleep on your back. Once we've had this information, we went to Muckrack and searched for journalists that consistently write about sleep and well-being. We've sent these journalists the advice provided by the client, and within one day the links started flowing in. Glamour magazine, a DR81 website, picked it up. Huffington Post, DR88, Mirror UK, DR90, a massive avalanche of links blasted to our client's website with this simple yet effective campaign about how to sleep on your back. I hope this inspires, and I hope you'll use this technique to land massive links to your or your client's website.
If you want similar link building PR campaigns for your website, head to search-intelligence.co.uk and get in touch with them now. All right. Welcome back to the Niche Pursuits podcast. My name is Jared Bauman, and today I'm joined by Mordy Oberstein. Mordy, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, great to have you on board. So just to give you, make sure I introduce you and your title and what you're here with. You're the head of SEO branding at Wix. You've been there for a while. You're the host of a podcast. So that kind of puts me in the hot seat here a bit. I got to make sure I'm on my A game. You host the SERP Up podcast, and that's SERP spelled like an SEO would spell it, SERP. Man, I'm really excited to have you on board today.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Let's do this.
Great. So, obviously, we got a lot of stuff to talk about in terms of what Google's doing, SEO, how it relates, what you see at the scale you see it at. Give us some background, if you can, though, before we dive in. Catch us up to who you are as a person, to your background, and what you're doing today.
So I'm a big baseball nut. I also happen to do SEO on the side when I'm not talking about baseball.
Okay. Well, I'll work all my baseball references in that I can.
Perfect. That'll be a real home run. Sorry. I apologize for that.
Good.
I started off, it's like my third career already. I started off, how I got into SEO, I was a teacher at one point in Baltimore City. And I ended up working for a educational software company writing educational, pedagogical materials for them. A very strong writing background. And at one point they said, hey, could you write our online content? You were one of the only native English speakers in the company. Could you? I'm like, I could write anything. And they said, great. Can you get organic traffic? I'm like, yes, if I knew what it was. And that's how I got into SEO. One thing led to another, and I started working for a company called Rank Ranger as their content manager. They're an SEO rank tracking tool. Eventually, I worked at Semrush before as the head of communications. I'm now at Wix, doing a lot of brand marketing around positioning the platform for SEO. So I'm basically an SEO nerd.
By all accounts, I mean, that's quite the resume for someone who didn't start with really an SEO background, then to be at Semrush and at Wix. And I mean, I know the platform you guys are building out from a learning standpoint over at Wix is very impressive.
Yeah,
reminds
thanks.
me of the early Moz days, to be honest with
Yes,
you. Or,
thank you.
You know, it has a very Moz-like feel to the Learning Center, which I took full advantage of when I was learning SEO.
Yeah, same.
So anyways, you're doing some really impressive stuff.
Thank you. I try.
So, I mean, let's set the stage here like this, because we're going to dance around a bunch of trending topics right now, and I don't think these topics are going to age out quickly. So I think that whenever this comes up in your feed, it's going to add value. But they are the topics du jour. I mean, maybe before we dive into that, give us some insight into the visibility that you have in the space, you know, so people can kind of understand the value your perspectives is going to have. I mean, at Wix, what kind of website volume are you seeing? And just, I'd like to get a little bit more behind that before we dive in.
So on the particular topics that we're talking about today, so one of the great things that working at multiple SEO platforms is a huge amount of data. So rank tracking tools, SEO tools, they track websites, they scrape the web, for lack of a better way of putting it, and they have an enormous amount of data. And one of the interesting things you can do with such data is sort of track rank volatility, which is why these platforms generally have some kind of rank volatility. We call them weather tools. There's a Semrush sensor, for example. It'll tell you, you know, when there's more volatility, less volatility, that kind of thing. And one of the great things that I can do is dive into what's actually happening at the web level. I hate putting it that way because even the biggest SEO tool is a very, very small fraction of what the web actually is. But you get a flavor or a taste of what's happening across the web. You can dive into different verticals. I love particularly diving into websites and what's happening with their traffic. I still consult for Semrush, so I have a special secret sauce behind the scenes dashboard where I get to track a lot of these things. So if you'll notice, like if Barry Schwartz, for example, is writing a post about what happened the last update and the level of volatility, so he'll quote data from Semrush. That's me writing that summary for Barry, sending him over the data. So we can talk about what's happening, share it with the industry. So I guess that's my qualifications for doing this. That's my license, I guess.
Well, since we don't really have licenses in this industry, I'd say that's a pretty darn good license. I mean, the Semrush sensor is a great segue because it like you said, I mean, it tracks the volatility or the change in the rankings, and that's oftentimes not only a precursor for updates that are getting released or non-announced updates, right? Because there's just because Google doesn't announce it doesn't mean they're not constantly tweaking their algorithm. And then obviously inside of an update, we often get a lot of what are called tremors or large-scale shifts during an update. Just a very high-level question, if I own a website and let's call me a content producer or an affiliate marketer or something, how closely do you think I should be paying attention to SERP volatility, daily fluctuations in rankings? Like, weigh in on where I need to be involved in this and where I don't, especially with the volatility nowadays with Google.
It depends. It depends on what you're going to do with the data. I'll say, there's no harm in looking at it, you know, every couple of days kind of thing. I don't think you look at it daily. If there's actual update that you know is going on, so maybe like getting a sense of what's happening each day, all right, maybe there's benefit to that. But every couple of days, whatever it is, I think there's value if you use it as getting a general understanding what the ecosystem is. And I talk about this a lot where the SERP or Google or even if Bing or the other the search engines, they're ecosystems. They're living, breathing dynamics. And it's really important to understand what are those dynamics. If you're noticing, hey, there's a lot of small volatility going on right now. I remember looking a couple of months ago, looking at a bunch of websites, and you could see in the long-term rankings, their average rankings, just levels of ups and downs every once in a while. And then, May 2021, I'm making up the month, I don't remember the time. All of a sudden, a certain time period hits, it's March 2022, and there's like fluctuations. You see it in the site's rankings every day. That's important to know, because if you start seeing there's a lot of, let's say you're looking at it monthly, like, oh, we lost rankings, oh no, what happened? Well, yeah, you lost rankings because the report compares the first day of last month to the first day of this month, and you're happy to catch it on a downswing. But if you wait until tomorrow, it'll be just fine. So it's important to understand what's happening in the ecosystem so that you understand how to interpret data. It's also really important to understand in terms of what you can expect out of rankings, how they're going to behave, what Google's perhaps looking for, how to predict certain things. So I know for a particular website, and it does, there are, in my opinion, there are websites that get stuck in certain patterns for whatever reason. And I know with this particular website, if I start seeing really sharp, major losses, major gains back and forth for a couple of days in a row, there's probably a bigger update coming soon after. And I've seen it a few times with this website. It's a little bit anecdotal, but it's my personal take on it. And okay, if I see that happening, don't freak out. There's an update. It's going to hit. Let's see what happens. And even if it does hit, I was working on with a site, it got, I must say clobbered, but it lost some important rankings during the March 2023 core update. Mm-hmm. I'm like, oh no, that's so annoying. Why? This page is great. That page is great. The site's great. What's going on here? But you have to give it time, because actually with the recent April 2023 reviews update, even though it's got nothing to do with reviews at all, they're not even on the same SERPs as websites that talk about reviews, it saw a restoration. And Glenn Gabe has a great article about this, that sometimes these algorithms sort of get locked in together. And they, piggyback is a bad word, but they sort of get interweaved and interwoven. So you have to give it time. It's worthwhile to track, but be patient with it. Understand the ecosystem, but don't react just because you see certain data or certain patterns happening.
I retweeted that exact article from Glenn Gabe.
Nice.
And it's the perfect segue because, man, you hit the nail on the head. I want to ask you and just cut to the chase here. So we're recording this in May of 2023, and I can look down my piece of paper here. In the last 12 months, we've had core updates, which are typically released 2-3 times a year. We've had review updates, which used to be called the product review updates and now have been expanding and evolving. You touched on the fact that review updates definitely no longer just impact review URLs. They've expanded that. We have the spam update. We had a singular, or maybe there's been 2 helpful content updates.
Yeah, 2 of them.
And yeah, I'm probably missing a couple other classifiers of updates. But really, we've got so many types of updates now. And even inside of them, it's very difficult to understand. Now, you have access to a lot of data and a lot of reporting. So how does somebody interpret the ups and the downs of that and use that to fuel changes to their website? Broad question, I know. But if I'm in the washing machine of updates and yet trying to stay on track with my publishing schedule, my topical silos, my backlinks, my media mentions, all this stuff. How do I stay on board with all the updates while also staying on track?
Yeah, it's a really, really, really good question. And this goes back to, again, understanding what's happening in the ecosystem. For example, the helpful content update is a great example of this. There have been 2 updates to that update, but it actually is an update that works in real time. It's always present, and it's always looking at websites. And then once you pass a certain threshold, either of going back into the quality side of things, or if you go on the other side, where the dark side of not being quality, you could be impacted by it. And that's why really where understanding the ecosystem comes in. For example, I'm trying to think, I think it was in 2022, so I wrote Semrush's State of the Search report. And one of the things we actually looked at was how powerful were the core updates over time. And if you look from Google start running this series of core updates, they've been running core updates forever, but what we call now the modern era of core updates since 2018, less and less and less and less powerful until actually in the most recent version that Marcus Tober wrote, which it was just released, I think today or yesterday, when we're recording this, that the March 2023 core update was way bigger than the more recent ones over the last 2 years. So that's an interesting question why that's happening. But understanding the ecosystem, that the core updates might not be as impactful, and that what we're looking at is more of like a real-time kind of algorithm where things are constantly changing, that's important to understand. Because you're going to see constant volatility in a lot of for particular keywords or particular websites or particular URLs, whatever it is. And I think what you need to do is realize when a pattern is locked in and when it's not locked in. And once you can determine whether or not the ranking trajectory is locked in, this is how Google is now relating to this website, which, by the way, can take months. You can take a good month or a month and a half or even 2 months to really see what's happening, depending upon, again, what's happening out there in the ether. Like, again, I just mentioned, we had a March core update, then an April review update. In that kind of ecosystem, you're talking about a 2-month period where you might not really be able to see what's exactly locked in, what's not locked in. But assuming you've able to determine, okay, this is a new way Google's ranking this page for this keyword, now what? And what I like to do, if you can, this is my personal, everyone's got a different flavor of doing this, is seeing what replaced me.
Yeah.
What did Google now put there, and what's different? Is it an intent issue? Like, if let's say it's a query like buy a new laptop, and I'm an affiliate site and I have review pages, like reviewing all these laptops. Did Google replace me with product pages? Perhaps there's an intent shift, right? Google's like, no one wants to know about reviewing the product; they just want to buy the product, so you're out. That's obviously a difficult scenario. Unlikely for that particular keyword, by the way. Or perhaps like there's different content out there. The way like you're an affiliate, you're doing a product review of laptops, and another review page outranks you now, or multiple review pages now outrank you, whatever it is. And that's why it's really important to keep track of your competitors. You can see, okay, these guys were ranking number 20, and now they're ranking number 2, and now I'm ranking number 20. What happened? So once you understand like which competitors are now ranking, one of the things that I think that SEOs tend not to do is they'll go look at the pages, they'll look at like the title tag, the headers, the links, the internal linking, all that good stuff. But you actually have to read the content. You have to like read what's actually on the page, and this goes back to what I saw during the February 2023 product review update. I wrote a post for Search Engine Journal about this. And again, when it comes to algorithm updates, one of my points is that look for consensus. If Glenn Gabe is talking about something and Lily Ray is saying the same thing and Marie Haynes is saying the same thing and Dr. Peter is saying the same thing, that's probably what's going on. Because each one of us is like a very, very small sliver of what's actually happening in the algorithm. But one of the things that I saw, and I think other people saw this, similar things, was Google's gotten better at being able to pick up actual experience. Meaning if you actually use, in this case, you actually use the product. And they're better able to understand language profiles like first person, I, we, they, and not just that. Like that's like an easy one to fake, but that and combined with the language structure, being able to think and realize, wait a second, this page has a greater likelihood of actually being written by somebody who actually used the product versus somebody who didn't use the product. So if you go through and you see the content that's ranking better, really kind of reflects something like that where the content is just different. There's a different level of quality to the product, meaning the product in this case, meaning the content itself, not the product in the product review. You probably want to do that. Like Google has said, and I know SEOs have debated this, and is the core updates, is it about tech SEO? Is it about links? Is it about this? Is it about that? And I'm not saying it can't be those things. I'll quote Glenn Gabe for the third time or fourth time today. Throw the kitchen sink at it. You never know what's going to move the needle. But Google's guidance has said that these updates are about content. It's about content and quality of content. So I suggest you look at the quality of content. And my litmus test for this is think like a brand marketer. As somebody who also does brand marketing and loves brand marketing, you ever go to a webpage and in 3 seconds flat, you know that this is crap. You just looked at it, you read a couple of lines, it's crap. If that's how you feel about your own content, that's probably how the search engine feels. So give it the brand sniff test. If the tone is right, if the level of depth is right, if it comes off as there's something good about this page, something intangible, then you're probably on the right track. If you feel like, yeah, you know what, let's be honest, probably not. This feels like an affiliate page, and it feels like I'm just driving the affiliate sale here without offering actual value, then that's probably how Google's interpreting you.
Let's talk to the person out there who is reviewing products and actually, getting them in their hands and reviewing them, or actually hiking the trail that they're reviewing, or actually going to that hotel in Lisbon, Portugal, and reviewing it, right? But they're not ranking well, or they're getting hit in these updates. These people, by all intents and purposes, they're like, I have the E in experience, but it's not translating. Mm-hmm. What are some things that these people can look to improve upon in order to rank better when they actually are checking the experience box?
So I'll say two things in this case. One is, like, there is SEO stuff you have to do. For example, interlinking, creating, and I say interlinking, I don't mean just like, okay, yeah, it's like checkbox interlinking. What you're trying to do is create semantic understanding. Like, you want Google to understand, for this topic, I'm relevant. So imagine you had a website that was, I don't know, you sell tickets, like to, events, and you're writing a blog post about reviewing microwaves. You might have the best content about reviewing microwaves on the planet, but it's out of context. Mm-hmm. And the overall user experience, where you want to go to the next page, is the user could be like confused. Google, why the hell am I here? This website is selling me tickets to Guns N' Roses. It doesn't really tell me about microwaves outside of this one page. So that sort of semantic understanding of what this website is that is topically relevant, interlinking, creating clusters, all that good stuff is really important. So that's one. The second thing is, you might have great experience in whatever it is. You just might be a really terrible communicator of that.
Fair enough.
Which is also a possibility, right? Which is where writers get paid to write. So one thing you might want to do if you're just like a terrible writer, which happens, is you could hire a content marketing agency to take your expertise and to be able to translate that in a way that's digestible, usable, and communicable, which, I think is the right way to use a content expert, as opposed to saying, hey, content expert, I know you're in Nebraska, you know nothing about hiking, in Tibet, but could you write an article about hiking in the Himalayas? That's, I think, how sometimes we think about content marketers, where the real way I think of using content marketers is, I have the expertise, I don't have the time or the resources or the ability to translate that into actual content. Help me. So that might be a good time to go to an SEO or a content writer to help you.
Yeah, I remember one of the first websites I worked on was a tech site, and it was clear that the person who was writing it was definitely an expert in, like you said, like laptops and various graphic cards and all these things. And but the readability was atrocious. It was just a wall of text.
Yeah.
Long paragraphs. Heaven forbid you load it on mobile. I mean, you wouldn't even see the bottom of the paragraph. And so a lot of these, things where even in that case, the writing wasn't terrible, but it just wasn't readable. Like you just approached it and you're like, I can't handle this. And you're going to bounce.
So on target. I feel that 1,000,000%. It's like when you have a professor in college or whatever, and I'm sure they're brilliant, but like they're the worst teacher on the planet. It's the same thing, just on a webpage.
Yeah.
That's basically my entire educational experience.
I went to one of those colleges. I know exactly what you're talking about. Okay, so those are some really good points, and I hope everybody listening hears that. There's the experience factor, and you're saying that's becoming more and more important. Google's more and more dialed into that. But then there's also, you might have the experience, but you still could fail with a lot of the SEO side of things, or with the just branding, readability, we'll call them ethereal aspects of the content itself.
Yeah, I think usability is a major part of SEO. Google recently had this whole snafu with the page experience update. They took it off of its page where they have ranking system. It's not a ranking system. SEO's like, oh, it's not a real thing anymore. And Google's like, no, we still a ranking signal, just they're separate. They're not part of the same system. They're all different signals for different parts of the algorithm, blah, 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 blah. But as part of this whole scenario, Google updated the guidance on the helpful content update to talk about page experience. And you would think, okay, core vitals, blah, 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 and that is there. But when it talked about page experience, it also said, how easy is it to access the main content of the page? So what Google's defining as page experience is really, in my mind, usability. How usable is this page? So imagine you have 2 web pages. They have basically the same content. Let's imagine a crazy scenario where they both have the exact same content. You went to whatever AI tool and it spun out the exact same content. Don't do that. Just scenario. And what one author decided, you know what, I'm going to reformat. I'll make bullet points. I'll put some headers in. And the other author said it's the same content, but it's not going to format it at all. Which page should rank?
The first.
Yeah, right? So usability is part of the equation. So again, like you may have that great experience, you may have the great content, but if it's not usable, I think Google's looking at that.
Let's talk about the idea, and you referenced it a bit earlier. Let's talk about the idea of your website having almost like a quality score. And I don't want to get into, whether Google scores websites and like,
What's your DA?
Yeah, exactly. We can get at the DA and the DR and the idea of page rank for many years. I'm really just talking in general about one side of it says if a page drops, you evaluate that page, you look at that page for what it's worth, you evaluate it up against the competitors and all the things you've talked about. There's another argument that's emerging that talks about Google looking at an entire site, and that when it's very clear, we see like there are often times in core updates or other updates where it's not on a page level. Like this website, boom, 80% of the content just dropped. Is that Google really working on this website as a whole? And then it's one thing to improve a page. How do I improve my website's quality score? Air quotes for those listening on the podcast.
So you're hitting a pain point. So I felt like, Gull and Gabe and I go back and forth in our DMs like we can't believe this, like still a question. Because SEO's like, oh, it's all at the page level. It's all at the page level. Before I get into what Google's actually said, like let's stop and like analyze the logic of that. I go to a website. Now Google's job is to get me to a quality result. But what they really want to do, let's put it into a business perspective. They want me to have a quality experience so that when I decide to go to a search engine again, I don't go to Bing. So that eventually I'll hit a scenario where there's a query while I'll click an ad. Like that's what fundamentally they want to happen. Mm-hmm. If they send me to a website where one page is great and then the next page that I click on, again we talk about bounce rate. You don't want me to bounce, you want me to go to the next page. Where that next page is absolute crap. Does that qualify as a good experience that's going to get me to go back to Google, to do another search, to eventually click an ad? No. So logically speaking, Google needs to be concerned about the website at the domain level when it comes to quality. Mm-hmm. It's just a very logical point. Google said that. They said this repeatedly, and I don't know why SEOs don't believe them. It's in the guidance on the helpful content update, and Google said this in other places as well. Quality is a domain level analysis because of what I just said.
Today's episode is sponsored by Search Intelligence. Here's a short clip of Ferry from Search Intelligence showing you how their agency built digital PR links to a client's website.
What a masterpiece PR link building campaign. With 20 links in big publications such as The Sun, Express, Mirror, Wales Online, and still landing, I would say this campaign is a massive success. We told the press that people should turn on their heating this summer if they want to save money next winter. And we landed over 20 links in national and regional UK publications for our boiler client. That's crazy. The campaign hook was pretty clever. It is a known fact, at least in the boiler trade, that if you keep your boiler off for many months, it might rust and it might get you into trouble if you keep it turned off from spring to next winter. We therefore advise the press, with an expert commentary piece, on behalf of our boiler client, that people should turn on their boilers this summer just when the heat wave is in full swing. This way they can avoid a boiler failure next winter and save money. Massive publications picked up our story, including The Sun, Express, Mirror, Wales Online, and a few more dozen publications, giving our client links, lots of links, and lots of happiness hormones. No wonder that so many journalists covered our story, as this headline is a massive link magnet to their audience. This case study highlights the fact that a clever hook can be applied to any insight or story to make a campaign more successful and more compelling to journalists. Can you imagine when people see this headline in the news, you should turn on your boiler this summer? There's no way they would not click on it. I would click on it. So this was the hook, and this is why this campaign was so successful. I hope this video inspires and shows you what's possible with a clever hook.
If you want similar link building PR campaigns for your website, head to search-intelligence.co.uk and get in touch with them now. So I heard somebody from Google at, I believe it was PubCon this past year, say that it's very difficult for a website to recover when the helpful content classifier of poor quality gets placed on them. Matter of fact, I believe I'm not overstretching in that person from Google said you might never recover or fully recover.
Fully recover, I believe. Yeah, it was Gary.
It was Gary. So Gary Eels, and I should have pulled it up. I didn't know we were going to kind of go this route on the podcast. I should have pulled up the exact quote, but we talked about it in a past podcast, so I remember it. But with that being the scene setter, what are the things we can do to improve domain level quality scores in terms of recovering from an update?
It's so funny because I'm not trying to plug my podcast here, but Crystal Carter, right? Crystal's the head of SEO communications at Wix, so we're like the SEO team handling our podcast. We were just talking about doing an episode. Don't steal this idea. We didn't do it yet. Okay.
Don't worry. This podcast won't come out for a while, so you'll probably be able to sneak it out before this one even hits the airwaves.
Perfect. Okay. I was really worried for a second. What is helpful content? It's such a broad question. I don't want to, it's a whole topic into itself. But I'll quote Crystal on this. It's not just content; it's also the technical health of the website. Right. So for example, if Google said if they keep getting 500 errors, they're not going to keep going back.
Right.
Right. If there's broken links all over it's just a bad experience for the user from a technical point of view. It's painfully slow. I'm not even talking about passing core. It's just like there's CLS, things are shifting all over the place. You can't even click on a damn button. All of that represents the website and the quality of the website. Right? Then obviously there's having all of your ducks in a row. There's alt text on images, all of the things. And then there's the content itself and the experience itself, right? Does the site structure make sense? Is there logical connections? Can I move from one page to the next page? Well, is it interlinking makes sense? I would even say, are there links, external links? Because I look at links very differently than most people. I look at them as like citation, right? Imagine I was writing a doctorate thesis going back to college again.
A bibliography.
If I have to source. Or I look at it pedagogically as a former teacher. If I want my student who's reading this content to understand the concept that I'm talking about, but I can't explain that concept right now, link, here, go explore that concept. Right? That's a quality experience. And then there's the content itself. What Google said, but I mentioned before about the usability, how easy is it to get to the main content of the page. Are there 5 million ads they have to click through just to get to that part of the page where I actually want to get at? Not good, right? And then there's the content itself. Now, how do you want to define quality content when you talk about the words themselves? And that's a hard question. I'll say to narrow it down, two things. One is that it's targeted to the audience, which goes against every SEO's, hair on their body. Like, no, we don't do that. We try to grab as much keyword search volume as possible, as much traffic as possible. Dare we target the audience with specific nuanced content? But it's that making sure that piece of content actually speaks to your target audience. And part of that, or you want to say secondarily to that, is that I'll define quality content as being nuanced. And that it depends, right? Because it could be completely too nuanced. If you ask me, what is, what is rocket science? You're looking for a very basic, I'm a 12-year-old, I'm looking for a very basic understanding, what is rocket science? If I started going into quantum theory, about too nuanced. So it's the right amount of nuance for the right audience. But having that nuance of being able to offer something that hits the user's need in a substantial way, I try to define it by predicting the need. Like if you want to think of what's a good piece of content, It's a content that predicts the need of the user. So if your user's a 12-year-old trying to understand rocket science, what might they need? Well, they'll probably need a picture or two. They're 12-year-olds. They might even need a video. They might need quick blurbs of definition, whatever it is. If I'm talking to astrophysicists, what are their needs going to be?
Oh, yeah.
And I think that, by the way, and I wish Google would do more with this, and I think they haven't because I think they're lost in the AI world. But Google MUM, multitask unified model, which Google has basically talked a lot about in terms of, okay, I can combine text input with image input. So I don't know. I think the example they gave is, I have a piece of my bicycle that's broken. I don't know what it's called, but I know I need to get it fixed. So I can take a picture with a Google Lens and then write how to fix. And Google can combine the picture, realize that's the chain, and say, here's the results on how to fix the chain. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of talk around that, but one of the things that gets overlooked with MUM is what when Google gave their initial example about it, is that it breaks down topics. So I think that one of the original queries that Google gave as an example had to do with hiking and preparing for a hike. And Google showed you how MUM can parse out prepare. What does it mean to prepare for a hike? And as I hope refinement around being able to parse out topics or keywords or phrases becomes more integrated into the algorithm, that will mean that you predicting and parsing out the needs around a topic gets input into your content strategy. I'll give you an example because I know it's very thorough. A baseball nut, right? So I have a piece of content of go to Yankees game. People search for go to Yankees game. I have a piece of content that ranks for go to Yankees game. Yankees are our baseball team, in case you don't know. You've been living under a rock and you don't like baseball. What I would do as a content person or as an SEO in this case, okay, what does that predict? What are the needs of a user who's going to a Yankee game? Is it just to get tickets, or how do I get there? What's the etiquette? Can I wear the other team's jersey, or will I get my ass kicked? Is a neighborhood safe at night? How much does food cost? Can I sneak in food? Is that bad all of the because I don't want to pay $20 for a hot dog, right? All of the predictive needs of the user, that's good content, in my mind.
I've never thought about the point you brought up, and I kind of want to underscore it. What is rocket science? And am I writing this for somebody who is trying to get their PhD in rocket science and is Googling for some references? Or am I writing this for a 12-year-old, like our kids, who are going, man, what is rocket science? And they need pictures. And those are two vastly different articles. But that as a metaphor is really incredible, because if you wrote an article about what is rocket science for a PhD, and the general user that's searching are 12-year-olds, clearly Google, from signaling and from even if they ever get that into the top 10 results, is going to figure out that that's the wrong type of query for what the general searcher is doing. And you might pop in and just look at your article in isolation and say, man, this is the piece on advanced level rocket science, and yet never rank because you missed the intent, the level of intent, the level of depth. Very, very fascinating to think about, because it makes total sense.
Yeah, it's a really good, and we've come full circle, right? Content that's really good but not ranking. And I know we think of intent there's a commercial intent, a navigational intent, and we have the 4 intents, but there's really micro intent. Let's say it's informational content. Okay, but what kind of information do I need? What's the micro intent of that? And I think it's a really unexplored or untalked about topic in SEO.
Yeah. That's a good one. That's another podcast episode there too, by the way. So you've mentioned it a couple times. Wouldn't be a podcast in 2023 and beyond if we didn't talk about it. So let's wade into the AI conversation, and let's talk about Google specifically and their. I'm going to give you a really open-ended question on purpose, because I just want to see where you run with it. But
I'm going to input into an AI chat and come back to you with an answer.
Okay. Well, if you start typing now, you'll get an answer, and I'll drag the question out so you have a good answer by then.
Appreciate it.
That's a little joke at how long it can take some of those things to spit out content. Where do content and affiliate marketers specifically need to be thinking about AI, and where do they not need to be thinking about AI?
Such a loaded question.
I
Okay,
know.
so AI
I'm
is
letting
not
you
going-
decide which way we go with this, and then I've got a lot of questions we can get into.
Okay. AI is not going away. And so I got into SEO from the content. I love content. And because of that, I hate AI. I don't hate AI. I'm down on AI. I think it's
Yeah.
stupider than humans, which is saying a lot. Yeah, sorry. One of the things that I do want to say, though, is it's not going away. And there are ways to properly leverage it. We actually did a recent webinar with Mike King and Ross Hudgens about AI, and Ross put it in a really nice way. If you give the AI borders and confines and structure, it's probably going to do something pretty good. If you take it, hey, here's a paragraph, write me a header, that's probably up its alley. If you say, write me a post about this, it's very open-ended, that's probably where you get into trouble. If you're an affiliate marketer, again, Google's coming, I hate to put it this way, but Google's coming after you. Because we have been screwing up the web, in my honest opinion, for a very, 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 very long time.
We don't have a
And
good
I'm not
reputation.
saying, yeah, a little bit. And I'm not blaming anybody. We're just kind of there's an incentive cycle, and we're going with it, which is, fine. But now that incentive cycle is starting to change because Google is changing, user expectations are changing. I think there's a whole conversation about the Google results not as good as they used to be, and I think it's got less to do with Google showing less quality results and more people waking up being like, yeah, the internet's crap. So I think leave it aside for the algorithm equation for a second, your users are expecting something different from your content fundamentally, or from web content fundamentally. And I think that's very particularly important for affiliate marketers to realize. From the algorithm point of view, it doubles back on what we're talking about with expertise. And I think one of the ways that Google is and is going to double down on looking at how do we sort of sift out this AI-ish kind of content, which is very similar. And Google's, we're not targeting AI content, I believe them, because it's very similar to just targeting your usual piece of crap content. 5 ways to build links that everyone's been done before, right? It's very, very similar. And in my opinion, the language structures in both AI written content and in those kind of pieces are very, very rudimentary. And I'll take it from a product review update point of view, or now it's a review update point of view. If I have a vacuum, I'm reviewing vacuum cleaners, and I never use a damn thing, so I'm going to write something like, yeah, it's great on carpet. Or, wonderful on dust. But if I actually used it, I might write something like, it's great on carpet except when it was pet hair, because that gave me a really hard time. Forget everything. Those two language structures are fundamentally different. And it's really easy for a human, and it's kind of exactly the wheelhouse of machine learning to profile that. That's literally what machine learning is built to do. It's to profile shit like that. I don't know if I can curse on the podcast, so I'll rephrase it. Crap like that. If your language structure doesn't lend itself towards expertise and experience, if not now, at some point, it's going to hit you. And AI can't do that. It can't offer that level of experience. Rich Tatum had a great thread on Twitter the other day where he's showing, how AI, you can ask it things to mimic experience. Like, yeah, write me a post about, what was it like to drive a Ford Mustang? But even the experience that it's offering is very cliche, very generic. You, as an actual person who've used or driven the Mustang, can offer a level of, look, there's nothing inherently valuable in experience per se. It's that the experience allows me to have unique insights. So if the experience you're trying to fudge with AI doesn't offer unique insights, what's the level of value of having the actual experience? So it's not like experience for the sake of experience, it's experience for the sake of unique insights. So the AI cannot do that. It will never be able to do that. So you might be able to do things like headers, basic product descriptions, helping you write some things, get ideas. There's ways to leverage AI. But that fundamental thing that's going to differentiate you and the rest of the pages out there is that unique experience for unique insights, which I don't know how you use an AI or anything other than actual unique experience to do that.
It reminds me of a bit of a story. I used to be a semi-professional speaker a while
Good that
back.
you have a podcast.
Lends itself well.
Yes.
And one year I went on tour, and I did the same talk in, I don't remember, 50 cities.
Amazing.
And yeah, it was like to the point where you'd wake up in the morning and kind of go, "Where am I today?" And you didn't know for a little while. But speaking of repetition, I got in the habit. I mean, I could deliver that talk, including the jokes, including
Yeah.
the euphemisms, everything with my eyes closed. Like by the end of that tour, I wouldn't even have. I literally didn't have to look at a screen or a prompter. I could do it word for word. And you could tell that it was starting to sound robotic. It was starting to sound
Yeah.
like I didn't have passion. And towards the end, I actually had to plan mistakes, mess
Yep.
ups, I had to actually shift the story to make sure it was authentic. Otherwise, it just sounded very robotic. And as I heard you talking, it sounds really interesting. It sounds like as I'm writing a review on a Ford Mustang, I need to talk about how I bang my knee when I get in because I'm 6'5",
Yes.
which I'm not 6'5".
Yes.
So I never
It's
had that
a-
problem. But like I need to talk about how the stick shift sits in a awkward place compared to the last Ford Mustang I drove. Like, are these the types of ways that we communicate in a way you talked about? You talked about how machine learning can pick up on a natural language versus a AI language. Are these the types of things we're supposed to do? Or give us some other tips to how to ensure that we don't sound like what a robot can sound like.
It's literally that. Like if you use, I was looking at they were like pet carriers, or whatever it was, and one of the websites that did well of the last product review update, not the last review update. It's so confusing. Last product review update. They wrote something like they have like, yes, they have like the usual pros and cons list. They wrote as a pro, like, great smell when you open it out of the box, like that new product smell.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like, that's awesome. Like I from just that, either you're the most creative person on the planet, or I know you actually used the stupid thing, because who else is writing something like that?
I think, and kind of going down that road, let's talk about the role that links play as it relates to AI and content and quality and all that. Like, because I'm going to pose a theoretical here. Because content could start to sound more similar as a result of AI and its entrance in the coming years, does that increase the importance of links to distinguish your content? Or does it actually go the opposite way and say that Google's going to double down on some of the content things we've already talked about and differentiating on that experience level and on that uniqueness level?
So my opinion is the latter, right? So links are a secondary signal. I know everyone loves links, and Google keeps saying they're not as important as they used to be, and no one believes them. But I think it's true. I'm not saying in every particular case, like in certain cases, like links are incredibly important.
Yeah.
However, they're a secondary signal, right? It's only like if Google could understand the content perfectly, like you and I could, would it bother with links? Like, the only reason you have a link is because Google can't do that. It's a secondary signal like, well, we don't really understand it, but everybody else likes it. It must be good. But if Google's getting better at actually understanding the content, then logically speaking, the level of authority that links tend to give would be less. And I think that's the same thing with where we're going with the AI content. I think we're more looking at like a doubling down on things like the domain overall. If you see things like, there's so much content that's very similar. And sometimes it actually may make sense. I know that people disagree with me about this. They have disagreed with me about this. Where I'm writing a piece of content about what is a snow tire, very short definition, a rudimentary piece of content about what is a snow tire. I'm probably not going to have anything in there that hasn't been done as a human, forget AI, 1,000,000 times over before. And I may not need to, and I may not want to. Imagine that we now used AI to write that piece of snippet-level content. And everybody's using that same AI to write the same thing, and it's all pretty much the same content across the web. So a hypothetical scenario. How does Google decide which page to rank? They're all pretty much the same. Well, let's make it a little hyperbolic. Let's just say I have a website that talks all about tires, and I have a website with the same content about snow tires, but they talk about magnets. I'm looking at a magnet that's why I'm randomly bringing up magnets. Which website, again, we talked before, does it make sense to rank? Obviously the one that's topically relevant about tires, because if I'm looking at the query not as what is a snow tire, but if I zoom out and abstract out, and I look at the query as this is a person who wants to learn more about tires, the site that talks about one page about tires and the rest about magnets makes no sense to send them to. So relevance, domain quality, the quality of the site overall plays a significant role when looking at a scenario where content might be more generic across the web, which is what the helpful content is doing, which I think that why the helpful content is a way of combating AI content in theory. So I think it's a double downing on content, not on links.
I read that article that you published on snow tires. I make you sound so authoritative when I say I read the article you published on.
There's no way you read it. Like, it was 20 pages long. Even the guy who edited, George Wynn, who was the editor of the Wix SEO Hub, it's like, do you ever write anything that's not 20 pages long? I'm like, nope.
Let's see if you still agree with me after my next question then. You talked on this article about we'll call it the natural language processing, and you actually put different articles written by humans and AI into this, and actually, I think you made them purple, if I remember correctly. You pulled out the different words that were evident of humans writing it. It's interesting that you kind of talked about that, because just last week on the podcast, I had someone on who shared their story about recovering from a Google update. They got crushed by the May 2022 update, and then saw recovery. One. Oh man, I have a little bit of history with that update as well. And then they recovered throughout the March 2023 update and the April review update of 2023.
Right.
And one of the things they talked about, and I'd love to get your take on it because it seems to have some relation, is they talked about how they took their content and they actually put it into Google's NLP, natural language processing, to understand the weight that Google was putting on different phrases, entities, and words, and then kind of reflect back and say, is that the weight of this? Or is it not the weight? Do I have the weight wrong? And then they talked about how moving sentence structure around, moving word choice around actually changed the weight of what Google saw the relevance of the word is.
Yeah.
And so I'm just curious, like you talked about that in your snow tire article, and is this the level of depth we need to go to make sure that Google is truly seeing our content as unique?
I think so. And if you're in a competitive, it all depends. Like if you're in a less competitive landscape, you're trying to rank for, what's the best soil for planting potatoes on Mars? There's probably not a lot of other fools writing content about this besides you. So you can write whatever you want, probably. But if you're in a competitive landscape, like you're an affiliate and you're competing with the wire cutter, then yes, like that's exactly what you should be doing. So the example that you gave from my article was, there are tools out there that I don't know how, I don't think they're doing a perfect job, but they're able to profile and say, you know what, like this phraseology here, most likely written by an AI writer. This one is probably written by a person. And the same thing with entities and Google understanding things semantically. And I think it's important to understand this, that sometimes Google's well smart, but sometimes at the end of the day, like they're a bot. And while you may have structured the article, the phraseology in a certain way where you thought there's clear connection, like entity connection, semantic connection. I've really built up the topic here to show like relevance around what I'm talking about. It may well be you have, but it also may well be that Google's has a gap there and they're not understanding it the right way. I've had this with indexing where like the post is a great post. I just like completely ignored the headers, because I wasn't really trying to rank. It's a podcast thing that I was doing on the side. Like, shoemakers' kids go shoeless kind of thing. Well, let me play around with this. I'm not being indexed. I don't really plan on getting traffic. But let's see what happens if I redo some of the headers and just make it a little bit easier for Google to make those connections. And all of a sudden, boom, it was indexed and stayed in the index. You have to kind of play around with it and see, move this, change that, update this, optimize that, to make it a little bit easier for the search engine to understand, like, this is what I'm talking about, and that's a connection to this, and this is connected to that, and this is the picture that I'm trying to paint. Because at the end of the day, they're a machine.
So we've talked a lot about AI's role and how to make sure that our content is clearly delineated from AI, even if you use AI in some capacity to create content. Where are good opportunities out of the gate for content creators, affiliate marketers, website builders in general to use AI? Like what are the right applications you think, or the slam dunk home runs? There you go. I did a baseball analogy. Although slam dunk is basketball. And home
no,
run,
but I caught what you were saying.
I'm trying so hard here to do it. So where are the home runs with AI right now in an area that they can be put to full advantage?
I mean, there's all sorts of ways you could creatively use it. I think it was the latest Solus has a whole like post somewhere. I think it's her. I could be wrong. No, it's definitely her. Of like ways to use AI for SEO. And there's some smart ideas in there. One of the ways I've played around with this, I kind of want to understand, like if I talk about party planning, you could ask like, what are some entities related to party planning, and it's a great way to get some topical connections, topical ideas, and see how a bot might understand a topic. It's a great way to do keyword research. Like, keyword tools are great, but what you're generally trying to do there is put it in an input. They give you a smattering of information. You're trying to weed out what's relevant to you, where you can just ask ChatGPT a particular question and get a particular output from it. So like those kind of ways are for research, understanding things, organizing information. That's great. It's slam dunk. Home run, sorry. I fell into your trap.
I wasn't going to say anything.
Oh, I know. I was disappointed in myself.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Or as I mentioned before, getting like new ideas, rewriting things. Semrush has the SEO writing assistant tool, and they've integrated ChatGPT-3 into there. And what it'll do is you take a paragraph of content, you think it sucks, you're having writer's block, rewrite this for me. It'll give you 3 options of the way you rewrote it. So things like that. Writing headers. I think even at one point John Mueller said he imagines in the future there's going to be tools that automatically can create headers for you or title tags for you. I think doing things like that, assuming you obviously review them, because who knows what nonsense is going to come out of there,
right?
Is a way that you can leverage AI to automate some things for you that you weren't going to do before. Writing a product description and then optimizing it from there. If it's a pretty generic, write a product description for socks. All right. Yeah, right about it for socks, and you take that as a basis, and then add in the USPs about your socks versus other socks. If you're in the sock industry, I apologize for completely decimating the uniqueness of different pairs of socks.
It's okay. I've already been decimating various sports as we go here today. So.
Yeah, that's fine. Like we might as well go at it.
Just pile on while we're at it.
Let's go after some cities we don't like. How about New Jersey as an entire state?
I was going to say, city or states. We could just go statewide if you want.
Oh, yeah. Okay. How about Canada, right? What kind of country is that? Okay, we're completely off the handle here.
I was going to say, I'm not sure if you're a Yankees fan or not yet. I didn't get the.
No, I'm definitely a Yankees fan.
Okay.
So I'm from New York, so nothing outside of this, outside of New York actually exists, because that's how we function.
Hence the Jersey reference. There it is.
Thank you. That's Jersey. Also, Staten Island and Brooklyn are part of the same Jersey thing. You could take that, too.
Yeah. I have a client in this that does have a market in the Staten Island, and I got in trouble for making some ill-fated reference I didn't even know I was making.
It's a dump. It was a garbage dump for 50 years.
Well, I was schooled on the inner workings of Staten Island versus Manhattan. Let me tell you.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, this hour has flown by, and just to kind of bring us back full circle. I'm really glad we just topically dived around. And, I think you said something prominent. I just want to get your final take on it before we close out. You made a comment. It was offhanded, but I want to call it back out and have you give a final take on it. You said Google's basically at war with affiliate marketers. And if they're at war with affiliate marketers, how do affiliate marketers respond and battle back?
Do you want the answer that you're honestly going to like, or the answer that I think is the truth?
I want the truth.
What I think is the truth is, and I think it's not just, I'm not picking on affiliate marketers here, I'm picking on just web content as a whole. Because I think what's happened is, Google's only as good as its technology allows it to be. So back in the day, you had PageRank, and PageRank was so novel, but PageRank wasn't fundamentally ranking great content. It was just better than the other search engines. So we got used to writing, as web creators, got used to writing content that aligned to what Google wanted of us. Like, we're like children, okay? We do the bare minimum. Like, whatever we can get away with, we can get away with. Whatever we can't get away with, that's what we do. So if Google set the threshold down here, that's what we did. And the problem is that there's 2 problems. Is that, one, the threshold of our users. So users, people, people kind of got used to that idea that web content is X. It's this. It's not great. It kind of serves my needs. It's definitely not Faulkner. But what's happened over time is that people have gotten fed up with this. And it's crap. And I think it's a lot of do with things around data privacy, fake content, review content, being targeted with all sorts of ads, all that kind of like bad behavior that companies have done on the web have made people very, like my dad, who knows nothing about anything. He's like, he thinks, like, what do you do? You do computer stuff, right, son? Yeah, I do computer stuff. He's like, is this a real review? How do I try? It's trickled down to him, and I think it's when
I have the same conversations with my dad. It's so funny you mention that. Yeah.
So if like my dad is asking questions like that, it's the state of the web. And I think when we as SEOs or digital marketers make fun of Google or whoever going in front of Congress and the ridiculous things Congress asks these people, I think they asked TikTok like, does TikTok work connected to the Wi-Fi or something like that? Or when Google came, someone was like, are you tracking me on my phone right now, right here? Like the ridiculous things that we look at that and laugh.
Yeah.
My dad looks at that and goes, oh, I can't trust Google, I can't trust TikTok, and I can't trust Facebook. And they become very skeptical about web content, which means the level of quality from a quote-unquote user point of view used to be down here, but now it's way up here. That's one. So I urge you to leave Google aside, because even if you rank and they get to your website and they look at the website, the user's level of skepticism is through the roof at this point. So great that you got them there, but if you're an affiliate, I'll play into the affiliate like world. Is it the point to actually make the money, not just rank? So if you're trying to make money and the users are more skeptical than they used to be, you have to up your level of content. At the same time, the incentive cycle has changed in terms of the search engine. They're much better at understanding content, and the technology has changed, and the bar has risen for what is acceptable or not acceptable. And we as web content creators are very slow to get around to that, because it's not a one fell swoop where Google's just killing off all the bad content. It's slow progression over time. It's like, you throw a frog into boiling water, it jumps out because it realizes what's going on. You're going to cook me. If you want to cook a frog, the way to do it, which I've never cooked a frog before, I'm Jewish, it's not kosher, is you take a pot of cold water, put the frog in the cold water, and slowly heat it up until it's dead. And I think that's what's happening. We are the frog, and Google is slowly turning on the heat to the water.
That's a good analogy. Harsh words, justified. You explain it well, and I think that this episode is a really good deep dive into so many of the nuances that have gotten introduced. I don't really know when it started, but certainly, ever since 2018, the Google updates have increased in frequency, increased in not severity, but when you look at it from a volume, it's confused everyone in terms of what to do. So
I appreciate kind of focus.
Right. Yeah. The Medic update feels like the last update that I had a lot of clarity about exactly what Google was trying to do. Right. And since then, it's definitely been confusing. So having people like you come on who have access to large amounts of data, have vast experience levels in SEO, not only on a nuanced level, but on a high level, it's just really great to get your take on a lot of these things. Thank you for coming on board. Sure. Where can people read more about snow tires and other things that you're talking about these days?
Over the Wix SEO Hub, it's wix.com/SEO/learn. We have a podcast that we do called SERPs Up. We have a newsletter called Searchlight that comes every month. We have articles from the world's smartest SEOs, not including myself. I would not include me in that conversation, but some actually smart people writing articles. We have a monthly webinar series. We actually started a live SEO audit series with SEJ. So a lot of great resources for you. Check it out. See if you like it.
Great. We'll include links to that in the show notes. Also,
thank you.
You should post on Twitter more. I enjoy when you tweet, and that's how we got connected. But I've definitely learned some things from you on Twitter as well. So I'll throw that shout out in as well.
Appreciate that.
Mordy, thanks so much. Hour flew by. We'll have to have you back again sometime soon.
Sounds cool. I'll have to have you on the other side. All right.
There you go. Until next time.
Gotcha.
Today's episode is sponsored by Search Intelligence. Here's a short clip of Ferry from Search Intelligence showing you how their agency built digital PR links to a client's website.
Do you remember this campaign? It was all over the news. It is the most intelligent royal campaign. With over 100 links generated in the world's biggest online publications, this is one of the most viral PR campaigns of 2021. This is how we've done it. The methodology was pretty simple. We looked at the QS World University Rankings for the institutions attended by key members of the royal family to discover which royal is the brightest of all. Meghan Markle came out on top, followed by Kate Middleton and Prince William. We put these findings in a press release and sent it to mainstream media and journalists who write about royals. From Russia to the UK, the US, Vietnam and Japan, this story got massive coverage, landing over 100 links and created a massive buzz on social media. Simple research, but a great story that journalists love to write about. I hope this will put you on fire and will give you inspiration.
If you want similar link building PR campaigns for your website, head to search-intelligence.co.uk and get in touch with them now.